Well, the leader of the Bloc Québécois has only been on the job a couple of months, but already he's making his presence felt. Yves-François Blanchet took over as leader of the Quebec Souverainist Party in January after several years of internal turmoil and poor election results. 20 years ago, the Bloc Québécois was the official opposition in Ottawa, but won just 10 seats in the last election. Mr. Blanchet is a former provincial environment minister, a political commentator, and an entertainment industry executive, and he joins me now. It's good to see you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for coming in to speak with me. You're trying to rebuild the Bloc Québécois into a force in Quebec and federal politics once again. But let's go back a bit. Why do you think so many Quebecers turned their back on the Bloc Québécois during the last decade or so? What happened?
Partly because we deserved it. I think that with time, the movement became more of an institution some days than it was the vehicle that carried what we wanted to be the dream of a nation. And it might seem, it's a little bit extreme, but that's the image I want to convey. And now we are back to the point where we have to build a lot with very few resources and with a lot of humility. And I think that's good. I think that's a good thing for the idea, for the party, for the movement.
Is your number one priority still Quebec independence?
Of course. We believe that Quebec and Canada would be better neighbors and partners than they are now, being forced into the same bedroom, listening each other snoring. I think we have a lot in common, but I think there are a lot of things that make us different. And we should accept those facts, those differences. But it's not a fight. It's an idea that we convey until a majority of our population will agree with that idea. And then there will be a period of discussions which will be very important for both our countries.
I think you've sort of touched on the important part I want to pick up on there is that it's a message that you need to try and convince the population. I guess when you look at some of the recent polls in Quebec, we just saw one a couple of weeks ago, 55% of Quebecers believe the idea of sovereignty is passé now, that it's settled. So who do you think your audience is? Who wants to hear the message?
I hardly believe.
Because if you want to implement that at some point, right? I mean, you need to have the party needs to have a presence, and you need to maybe to get back to where the party was at one time in the House of Commons here.
Very few times in history has the idea of independence got more than 30-35%, 40% of support within the population, but in 1995 where it reached 50%. And if 45% still believe that this is an idea worth discussing, keeping live, I think it's more than enough for us to go on and keep, let's say, not teaching because it would sound preposterous, but promoting the idea, explaining things to the population in order for them to understand what we propose. But many polls have been done through years about this idea, and the results have shown that most of the time, about 1/3 of the population of Quebec still favors the idea of independence.
Is certainly open
and that's
to the
more
message.
than enough for the Bloc to win many more seats than what we have now.
Okay. What's, the most recent test for the Bloc, I guess, was in the by-election in Outremont. And your candidate there finished fourth with just 11% of the vote behind the Liberals, the NDP, and the Green Party. That would suggest getting your message across is still a big challenge in Quebec.
There are some ridings which are far more better for us than others.
Yeah, Outremont is maybe not one of them.
anything,
Right.
anything but a good example of what the population of Quebec is like. Everybody has the same rights and the same value in my mind. That has to be clear. But some regions of Quebec are more in favor of our idea, and Outremont is clearly not one of them. We improved our score in Outremont from a few points, which is not that much, but that was not the issue. The issue was to be back on the stage with a clear message, with a united party, with a proposal, political proposal for the population for the coming election. And we knew then, and we still know, that we do not have much time to achieve that.
Where do you think, how do you think the path to success is for the Bloc Québécois right now in the current situation? You see Mr. Trudeau's popularity is taking a bit of a hit in the province of Quebec now. Some of that is because of SNC-Lavalin. Lots of suggestions that the NDP vote's collapsing. And the NDP and the Bloc, I would argue, over the last number of elections have shared some of those same voters. They've moved around. Where do you see the revival of the Bloc taking place? What has to happen?
There might be many answers to that question. One of them is that Quebec has tried the NDP in 2011. And it is quite clear within the population that it provided them with nothing. It gave them nothing. It gave Quebec nothing. And then they went with the Liberals. And the Liberals not only did bring nothing to Quebec, but they used Quebec money to develop Western Canada and oil. And there's a pretty large consensus in Quebec that this way to, let's say, this oil economy is not good for Quebec. We are still using gas as anybody else is, but we do not want our economic model to be built on oil and gas.
No, but you still import. As you know, I mean, you still import foreign oil. You still
That is not an argument.
But you know what they say?
Oil is the worst on the planet, and we are being forced accomplices, to the exploitation and exportation of that oil, instead of implementing a plan according to which Canada, like anybody else, should progressively get out of that economic model. We are trying to extract more and more, sell more and more, and have people consume more and more oil. And this is bad for everybody, and this is bad for the planet. It is kind of an irony that Canada has an increase of its average temperature twice faster than
twice the global rate.
The global.
But you know, as you say that, it's because if people in Alberta watching this, when you say that,
they don't seem to like me very much.
They think of separatism when you talk about that. They think, look at the advantages we give Canada from Alberta. And then Yves-François Blanchet says our oil's dirty, says we shouldn't be doing it. That makes them want to leave Canada too, but it's kind of ironic.
I think that everybody that consider themselves as a nation and want to take all the advantages of being a fully independent nation should do it. I don't have anything to do in Albertan politics, and I don't want them to have anything to do in Quebec politics. But if that's what they want, so be it. The fact is that Quebec does not have to be forced to invest into that economic model, which is not ours and does not suit our values.
Let me finish on this. The new secularism law in Quebec. You've heard what some commentators, some in Quebec, but a lot outside of Quebec, have said about that. What's your reaction when they talk about Quebec as being xenophobic and racist with this new secular law? You don't like when people say that about your province, right?
Of course, nobody likes that. Quebec welcomes a lot of people from anywhere around the world in a very generous way. And we intend to keep doing that. But in order to do that, we have to tell them what society they arrive in. And this society has one common language, it is French. This society has a few fundamental values, which is equality between men and women, equality between men and women, and the other one is secularism of the state. And this is something which has started being built in Quebec about 50 years ago, and nobody then discussed that as being unwise. But today there seems to be two visions of the way we should, as a state, manage those differences, which are quite new in our societies. Because if you go back, let's say 40 or 50 years or 50 years ago, people that came to Quebec or to Canada were mostly from Christian countries. There was no issue about those signs because everybody wore about the same religious signs. This is a new phenomenon. And in Quebec, in a society that already has its challenges in order to remain prosperous, our culture to keep thriving, we have to do more than any other society in North America because we are a French minority. And it is normal for this society to say, here are the rules according to which we want to welcome people. And people have said about anything about our positions in Quebec, or the position of most of people in Quebec. We don't want to exclude people from wearing whatever signs they want in the streets, in the stores, in the school, whatever. It's only a few people in a position of authority within the state that should not be entitled to wear religious signs because it tends to promote the idea of this or that religion toward the people over which they exert authority.
Let's finish on that. Do you think that will do you believe that gives the Bloc Québécois an advantage in the upcoming election, given the positions of the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives, which are at this point a little hard to decipher? The position of the Bloc, do you think that provides?
It is not mine to decide that. I can say for sure that it is clear that only the Bloc Québécois carries that position for one very simple reason. Bloc Québécois speaks only for Quebec. And no Canadian party could have this position and be accepted or tolerated in the rest of Canada. But because Bloc Québécois speaks only for Quebec, and this is a large consensus in Quebec, it is normal for us to carry this idea even here in Canadian Parliament. It is normal for us to do so. This is the reason for us to be. If it does provide us an advantage in the coming elections, it will be because we represent what Quebecers want or are better than anybody else.
All right. Yves-François Blanchet, good to speak to you. I know we'll have a chance to speak again as the campaign gets underway, but thanks for your time today.
It will be a pleasure.
Merci.
Thank you.